Today I'm going to give you a slideshow to show you how to convert a 10-speed bike into a single-speed bike. And I started with this Ross EUROTOUR. It was an old crusty, upright, sort of a city 10-speed. And I bought it at a flea market for like $5. So here's the bike. Now the first thing we're going to do before we convert it into a single-speed is get rid of the luggage rack, or the, what's it called, a pannier? The bag on the front. So here's a close-up of the bag. It sits on a rack. It's kind of got like a bracket that goes to these little leather side things. So there's a piece of Velcro at the back. Undo the Velcro, slip it off the rack, and there you go. There's your rack on your handlebars. So now we have a bike without the bag on the front. It's getting cleaner as we go. So we're going to take off the shifters, and you just use a little bit of a screwdriver. And the problem with the shifters is the screws always kind of strip out, so you might have to use a flat blade or a Phillips or an 8mm wrench on the back. But you take the shifters off. Now you're going to cut the shifter cables with my trusty channel lock wire cutters, which I have since lost, and I miss them. I should go get another pair. They're only like $18 at Home Depot. Now I use my awesome little tri-wrench. It's 8, 9, 10 to take off the front derailleur. That's just a little 9mm bolt. And you remove that. This bike came out of Pleasant Valley, New York, according to the decal on the frame. I don't know where I got this 8, 9, 10 wrench. I think I got it out of the saddlebag in an old bike that I got at a garage sale. And it's probably like a $2 wrench, but I use it all the time. It's fantastic. Now, 15mm wrench, that's one of my favorite wrenches ever, the Craftsman 15mm wrench, to remove the back wheel, because this is where the magic happens, because on the back wheel you've got 5 speeds and you want to get it down to just 1 speed, so you have to take the back wheel off. But first you got to take the rear derailleur off, and that's held in place not only by the axle nut, but also by a little 10mm or 8 or 9mm bolt, but it's a slotted bolt, so I used a screwdriver to get rid of it. Sometimes it's better to take the axle nut and the washer and get those out of the way and then use like a 10mm wrench to get that out, but a screwdriver worked in this case. So now what we have is a chain that's still stuck in the derailleurs, because the chain goes to the derailleurs and there's no real way to get it out. So I used my Park Tool chain breaking tool, the CT3, to break the chain, to get the chain out of the derailleurs. And you see the derailleur is still hung up on the cable. Now, here we have the rear freewheel, and this is a Shimano front freewheel. See, normally you just take a freewheel remover and you pop the freewheel off, but this is this goofy front freewheel, which is like, the freewheel is in the crank somehow. I don't know how it works. I don't care how it works. I'm sure you could Google it. But instead of being able to just drop a freewheel remover in and get a big wrench and take the whole thing off, now I had to get a little tricky to get this. This is called the rear freewheel, the real cluster. It's not called the cassette. People call it the cassette. It's not really a cassette. It's just a multi-speed freewheel. But what I used was a little, like a little drift or a punch and a hammer to get rid of the lock ring, because it had a little lock ring on it. And I'm gonna guess, it's been a while since I did this conversion, but I'm gonna guess the lock ring was reverse threaded, so I probably had to hit it so it went clockwise. And it looks like the lock ring was not the problem. See, this is what you go through when you do these conversions, is you think that one thing is a thing, and then the thing that you thought was a thing isn't a thing. So it turns out there was another like clip style lock ring behind what I thought was the lock ring, so I shoved a screwdriver in there, and there you can see the clip. Once I got the clip out, I was able to take this front, front freewheel logo panel off, and then the whole thing comes apart. It's just a bunch of little sprockets on a central hub. So now you got this central hub, which is threaded onto the bicycle hub, and that's what that looks like. This is just like a big chunk of metal, and it's threaded onto the bicycle hub, and you get the plastic pie plate behind it. That's what that's called, a pie plate. So I used a big set of channel lock pliers, and you can see they're really big. They're probably like I don't know, 14, 16-inch channel lock pliers. And they didn't work. So then I used my Tarah Park tool. This is kind of like a bottom bracket lock ring tool. And I used that. And with that, I was able to get it off. So that's the HCW5. Now again, this is an unusual configuration because normally these multi-speed freewheels will just have a couple little notches in them, and you use a Park tool freewheel remover, which you get for like $6, and there's a bunch of different configurations of those. But sometimes when you're doing these things, it doesn't go the way you want it to go, so you have to improvise. Maybe if you didn't have this HCW5 tool, you could have just chalked up that centerpiece in a vise and twisted the wheel and it would have come off. But you can see, or maybe you can't see, I don't know, you've got the center of the hub, which is threaded, so now I can put a single speed freewheel on there. And that's exactly what I did. So here's your hub with your pie plate and your tool and your threaded piece. Now I take a 16 BMX freewheel and I thread it onto the hub. And there you go. Now you have 1 speed instead of 5 speeds. So here's some tires and rim strips. I think these are used tires, but they were better than the ones that were on the bike. And this was just a quick build. This is not something that I'm really going to get into detail with. I just wanted to see how fast I could convert a bike, and the whole thing took me like 20 minutes maybe, and I did it in a parking lot in the ghetto. I didn't even do it at home. So the rear axle was a little bit sloppy, a little bit loose. Now, the right way to do that is to get some spanners and to loosen one side properly and then tighten it, but the wrong way to do it, which is the way I did it, was just a big adjustable on one side, a 17 millimeter on the other side, and just torque it and tighten up the axle that way so the thing isn't just flopping all over the place. But now you can see the single speed BMX freewheel on the hub. There's no multi-speed, there's no pie plate, it's just very clean and very simple. Now on the front, I don't know why I took this photo, but I think the reason I took it is to show that the axle nuts on the front of some of these old bikes, especially American-made ones like Huffy and Ross, are 9/16 on the front and 15 on the back. See, on the back, it's a 15 millimeter nut, and the inner nut is the cone lock nut is 17 millimeter, but the front axle nut is just 9/16. So I guess that's where I'm installing the front wheel. I must have already put the tire on there. And here's the tube that has a patch on it. I don't think I put the patch on. I think the patch is already on there, but as long as the patch is holding, then you can use the tube. I mean, I've had tubes with a dozen or more patches on them. Patches are weird. They're either going to hold or they're not. You know, if they hold, they'll hold forever. If they don't hold, you'll know it right away. Now, here on the front, this is a stamped steel front sprocket, and I could have taken the whole crank apart and put in a different front sprocket, but I decided to just keep it, or I could have cut the tabs off and cut off the outer sprocket, but I decided to just keep the outer sprocket in place. It prevents the chain from being thrown, but there's this plastic piece on the back, this sort of, God, I don't know what that plastic piece is for, so I had to get rid of that. It's kind of like a front pie plate. And now what is this? This is my little secret, which I'm about to share with you, the chain that comes off of a garage door opener. You see a garage door opener in the garbage, your neighbor's updating their garage door opener, you go get the old one, it's got like 8 feet, maybe more, maybe like 10 or 12 feet of KMC chain on there, and you can use it. It's 1/2 inch, it's not 3/32, so it's perfect for single speed builds like this. So this is the chain and the wiring and a couple of the brackets from an old garage door opener, and now I'm going to use this chain on the bike. So what I do is I put the bike together, you know, the axle nuts are kind of loose, and I just line up the chain to get a rough estimate of how long I need the chain to be, and then I cut the chain to length with my Park tool chain tool, which I guess I didn't show. And now here, I've attached the chain, and look at this. You can see something about this bike, and this is why this is just an example. This is not really a safe bike. This is just kind of an idea of how you build a single speed. Look at the chain line. The chain line is whether or not the chain is at an angle. Basically, the front and rear sprockets are supposed to be in the same plane, but they're not. they're in parallel planes, but they're probably 3/4 of an inch away from each other. So the chain is at this heavy duty angle. And you might get lucky. I mean, if you're using the bike for light duty use, then you could get away with that. But if you're really hammering on this bike, if you're really using it every day, then that angle of the chain is just going to destroy the chain. It's going to put extra wear on the chain. The chain's eventually going to snap. So in order to build this thing correctly, what you need to do is respace the rear hub, redish the rear wheel, or use a different sprocket on the front that's spaced off a little bit to the side. Now, I wasn't going to do that for this bike because this is a cheap, crappy bike. And I probably took this bike to the scrapyard after I finished building it. I just wanted to build it as an example of the mechanics of doing this. But if you were really going to ride this bike every day, you would not want your chain line to be that cocked. So you'd have to take the spacer out of the hub, cut the spacer in half, put half the spacer on the other side of the hub, redish the wheel. It's a process. You can Google it. You can figure out how to do it. So now here's the finished product. It's very clean. There's no shifters, there's no derailleurs, there's no big multi-speed cluster on the back, there's no pie plate. The only thing that's not clean about it is the front still has the trim ring, or whatever you want to call it. And that's just because I didn't feel like getting out the grinder and cutting it off and leaving sharp edges, and because it was just a real quick conversion. And then here's another angle of it, and you know, it's just like a... And right here, even though it's all rusty, it's just very clean. You just got a couple of brakes, no shifters, no bags, no garbage. So if you want to have a bike that's clean, that's easy, that's simple, just take your old bike and get rid of the gears, get rid of all the garbage. Here's that front end, and you know, it's not that bad. Like, I could cut the little fingers off, I could cut the little support tabs off, and I could turn that into, you know, I could just get rid of that entirely. But I figure leaving it intact keeps it strong. You know, it's a little bit of reinforcement, and it's not that big of a deal. And here's how it looks in the back. Very clean, no pie plate, no multiple gears, just one gear, very simple. And there's the little Ross logo. So now I'm going to go back to, Ross lugs, little brakes, EUROTOUR logo, very clean. And here's your cockpit. You know, this is what you're going to see as you're riding this thing down the street. And probably you're going to see a brick wall because I'm guessing the brakes don't work very well. Now here are the tools that I used from left to right. 15mm Craftsman wrench, channel lock wire cutters, 9/16 Craftsman wrench, a hammer and a drift, which technically I didn't really need, but you know, you never know what you're going to need until you have it. I mean, until you don't need it. Flat blade Stanley screwdriver, channel lock slip joint pliers, Park tool HCW5 bottom bracket tool, a big adjustable, my 8, 9, 10mm tri wrench, my Park tool CT3 chain tool, a tire lever, and a Craftsman Professional 17mm wrench. And here are the parts we took off, the shifters, and all this big pile of junk. Now this big pile of junk probably weighs, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 pounds. So you go from a 30-pound bike to a 25-pound bike. You get rid of some weight. It's very simple, all this crusty junk that just goes to the scrapyard. So now here we are back to the original bike. And you can see just how complicated and messy that bike is. And so in 20 minutes or less, I was able to convert that into a very simple, very graceful bike. Let's go back through the slideshow. You know, and that's what I turned it into. Now, I will leave you with the warning that this is just a demonstration. If you were converting this bike in real life and you were going to ride this bike every day, first of all, you would need to replace the brake cables. You would need to replace the brake pads because those cables are old, those pads are petrified, those brakes aren't going to work very well. You would need to put new grease in the headset and the bottom bracket and both hubs because the grease in there is 102 years old. You'd probably want to re-grease the pedals or maybe just splurge on some new cheap plastic platform pedals. And you would have to get new tires and tubes and probably rim strips because those tires are really old and crappy. And you would have to address that chain line issue because that's going to be a problem in the future. But the point of this video isn't to get into all the picayune details of you know, of building a bike 100%. It's just to give you an idea of how quick and easy it is to turn a 10-speed into a single speed, and how gratifying it is to see a much simpler, much lighter, much more efficient, much cleaner bike when you started with some rusty old jalopy that nobody would even want to ride in the first place. So I don't even know what happened to this bike. I probably sold it for 20 bucks or dumped it somewhere, who knows. But it was just an exercise, and I think it was a good exercise, because now you can see how easy it is and how satisfying it is to convert one of these bikes into a single speed. And in the future, hopefully I'll be able to make an actual video of converting a bike to a single speed rather than just a slideshow. But for now, hopefully this helped you, and thanks for watching.